Okie dokie. So if you're like me and you've been playing Dune Awakening, you have been bombarded with the many choices amongst your skill perks and trees. You've probably wondered which ones are actually doing what they say they do, which ones are mandatory, and which ones should never be spec'd into. I have taken the time to respec and test all of these, and today we're going to be talking about Planetologist in particular, because some of these barely do anything. Some of them do the opposite of what you might expect, and other things, especially the cut array and mining nodes on Planetologist, do not function in any way that you would have expected. For each of these, I started at unranked, and then I test the base of what they work with. So if it was a cut array, I tested the cut array yields with no perks active on any tree at all, and then I slowly introduced more levels and then recorded the yields afterwards. And so, for example, on climbing, I saw how many tiles in my base I could climb with no levels on, and then I checked how many tiles I could climb by adding each level afterwards. Speaking of, Mountaineer works exactly how it should. In terms of the available or the potential stamina for climbing, you would take your end total stamina and divide it by 1 minus the strain here. So for climbing stamina, you would do your total stamina divided by 0.75, and that would give you your end total stamina. Specifically for climbing, at least. Vehicle repair. Now this is actually a kind of quirky one. Every welding torch has a different repair quality percent. So a welding torch Mark V has a 90%, the Mark I, I believe, has a 76%, and that just means that if you were going to repair a vehicle from 0% to 100%, you're obviously not going to be able to get to 100%. This is where it would stop you at 90%. So you would lose 10% durability using a using a welding torch Mark V. Where the perk comes in is as another multiplier. So if we want to calculate exactly how much max durability you're going to lose, then our formula would be the maximum durability lost per repair, because it's obviously going to be subjective. You're not always going to be repairing from 0 to 100% every time, right? You might be repairing from 53% to 73%. I don't know. But our formula would be the maximum durability lost equals the total percent that you need to repair times 1 minus the repair quality of the welding torch. So in this case, it would be 1 minus 0.9, and then times 1 minus the perk reduction percent. So in this case, 1 minus 0.35. And then that will give you your total max durability lost. So in this case, if I did repair from 0 to 100%, we can't reach 100%, but in this formula, we would do 100% is the amount to repair times 1 minus the repair quality. So that would be 1 minus 0.9. This brings us down to 0.1, and that's going to give us 10% left. And then we do that times 1 minus the perk reduction amount, which is going to be 1 minus 0.35, which is going to be 0.75, the end total coming out at 7.5% total lost. So instead of being able to repair up to 100%, and instead of being able to repair up to 90%, which is what we would get alone with the welding torch, we're able to reach 92.5% as our new highest maximum durability. For Stillsuit Seals, the hydration capture bonus, I'm going to be completely honest, I tested it out in the blazing sun at all 3 levels, and I could not see a difference between any of the levels. Right off the bat, if I have to say one Planetologist perk should go in the garbage, it's this one. Do not waste your skill points on Stillsuit Seals. Scanner Mastery works exactly how you would expect. It only in the description mentions the hand scanner, but this does, unlike some other things, only apply to the hand scanner. This does not apply to the vehicle scanner, and the vehicle scanner perk also works the exact same way. It doesn't translate to the hand scanner, but it does increase the vehicle scan range in the exact same way you would expect any multiplier to. So for the 2 scanning perks, nothing unexpected there. Quickly checking off the fuel efficiency. Fuel efficiency for ground vehicles only applies to ground vehicles. This is going to sound self-explanatory, and I'm probably going to get someone that says, well, duh. But trust me, there are things later that do not work in the way they say. Both of these cap out at a 25% fuel cost reduction, and as such, that would be 1 divided by 0.75. That means if you max these out for your ground vehicles or your air vehicles, it means you will get 33% more fuel on average out of your vehicle. Overcharge is pretty self-explanatory. It adds more maximum power to whatever your power pack is. Do note, though, that a lot of these things, actually, scratch that. All of these things do not reflect in the stats on whatever item it is. So the power pool here says 600. My actual power pool when I pull out items is going to be 620. Oh, wait, what the? What? Okay, I didn't know that. That's fucking hilarious. So I was going to show my power pool at 620 because I just wanted to show you the number, but I have a power pool of 20 despite having no reactor equipped. So that's an interesting life hack, probably not intended. I didn't even think to test it without a fucking reactor or power pack equipped. Here's a little known fact. I bet you most people aren't keen on sharing before this gets fixed. But you could have up to a 40 power supply from nothing, because this seemingly gives power with no pack equipped. Anyways, you get the idea. It is additive to your total power bank. Rerouting, on the other hand, increases the regen rate for your power pack. Now, supposedly, this would be, in this case, 48 times 1.1 would be a 10% bonus. However, I cannot, using any measurement available to me, find any discernible difference between any level of rerouting. So this is another one that's going to go down the drain. Probably not best to invest in this at all. Dew gathering is a weird one. This is one where a lot of people think that it just applies to the Dew Reaper. That's incorrect. This absolutely applies to the Dew Scythe as well. And funnily enough, and this is something I can consistently reproduce, and I have no idea how to explain it. The percent bonuses at each level start out at 10, 15, and 20% at level 3, which is what you see here. But oddly enough, on the Dew Scythe in particular, level 3 gives Dew Scythes a 25% bonus. However, if you go to do this math yourself, you do need to recognize that the yield multiplier of the Reaper and the Scythe already counts as a bonus. So it's not going to line up if you just start multiplying things. You need to know that the yield bonus here is additive to the yield bonus of the Scythe and the Reaper, which doesn't mean it's bad, but it definitely means it's not as good as you might have hoped. So if you're looking for things to not prioritize as much, this is still one you're probably going to want later when you're spinning around in a circle in massive dew fields with your Dew Scythe, but this is absolutely something that you can pass on for now. This is something that I would skip rerouting and then put one rank into Dew Gathering just so you can get back up here and proceed in the skill tree. And yes, we are doing the cut array stuff last. You can chortle my balls. Compaction is pretty fucking obvious. If you go and shoot your compactor into flower sand or spice sand, etc., it does just give 10, 15, and 20% bonuses at each level, and they work exactly as you would think, just normal multipliers. So if it's a 20% bonus, you would take the normal yield with no bonuses, multiply that by 1.2. Sandcrawler Yield I can't test because I don't have a Sandcrawler yet, but all anyone would have to do there is just make sure that the amounts are lining up. Heat Management is another one I don't have yet. If things work as they should though, the 20% reduction in heat translates to a 25% bonus in boost length if you're using like an ornithopter in the deep desert, you're trying to get away from people. This will allow you to boost for 25% longer than your opponents, as long as you are Spice Prescient. Spice Surveyor, I don't give a single shit about. If you care about it, great. Everything you would need to know about it is already in the description. Conservation of energy at max rank. If it does truly reduce power on every single action taken, then that 9% reduction in power would be a 9.8% bonus over the long run in terms of your total power that you could use at any given point. Now for the good stuff, the mining. First up is cut array mining, which gives a 20% cut array yield. If anyone has tried to test this, they've probably been confused as fuck. But that's because the cut array yield is considered a separate entity than the analysis mode yield. And on top of that, there's a lot of people that believe that because this is cut array mining and then there's a vehicle mining perk, that this doesn't help vehicles. That's fucking wrong. In fact, this is the best bonus for vehicles by far. When it comes to the hand miner is broken into two parts. You take the yield of whatever your cut array is. In this case, I was mining granite, and the yield says 136. In order to get the standard yield, which is if you didn't aim down sight and you just shot the rock normally, you just multiply that yield by 25%. So for the hand miner, this is quite possibly the most debate fucking perk you will ever see, because that 20% is only a 20% boost on the hand miner's 25% standard yield. So the 136 granite yield that we saw, we'd take 25% of that, multiply that by 20%, and then that's the extra we'd get, okay? And that is where the analysis yield comes in as well, because the cut array mining only helps that 25%, and then the analysis mode only helps the 75% 25% that is extra, and this only occurs if you are aiming down sight and you play the mining minigame from Warframe Plains of Eidolon release. Deep analysis does not benefit vehicle miners. So if you're mining from the buggy, deep analysis, obviously there is no analysis mode in the buggy, and I did check just to be certain, this does nothing. But in terms of the analysis section, it's the same exact thing as you would expect before. You take the 75% from that 136, and then you would multiply that by 1.2, and that would be the total extra that you have. The reason why I said the cut array mining one helps the buggy miner is because the buggy miner is a cut array without an analysis mode. So instead of multiplying the buggy's yield by 25% to get this fraction that we add a morsel to, you take the entire yield of the buggy and you add 20% to that. So just an example, my Mark V buggy cut array, when it mines granite, has a yield of 378. But when we apply that 20% bonus, that changes the granite yield from 378 all the way up to 454. Whereas on the, what is it that I have here? The Mark IV hand cut array that I have changes its granite yield from 136 to 143 because of that 25% cut. That's pretty shit. In regards to vehicle mining, that straight up just adds another 20%, but it is not a separate multiplier. If you're familiar with buckets, they go in the same exact bucket. That means if you have cut array mining and vehicle mining, instead of doing 1.2 times 1.2, it is simply 1 plus 0.2 plus 0.2. So it's a 1.4 single multiplier in the end, and that is how the cut array bonuses work. I'd really like to drive home, though, that this should reinforce how valuable buggy mining is. If you're still mining by hand and you have access to a buggy, unless you're trying to reach a resource node that's clear across the other end of the map, you're a fucking idiot. The buggy cut arrays always have higher yields, and if you're not certain how to look at that, you can just go to wherever you can see a cut array and then press tab, and that tab will show you yields for everything. So like Jasmium on a Mark V has a 214 yield, and that's not counting the 40% bonus that we get from our cut array mining and vehicle mining. And then for Planetologist, that is it. Hopefully this can help you learn what to prioritize, what is utter fucking debate, and what is mandatory. For example, the cut array stuff. That cut array stuff is, I don't think you can live without it, frankly. But there are quite a few nodes in the Planetologist tree that I think have been overhyped to hell and back. This was done over 2 respecs to get all the testing done. However, I will only do it in 1 respec for the next tree that we go through, because obviously I will have more skill points to play with. So come back in 2 days and I will evaluate, test, and confirm a whole other tree.